everybody. Welcome to Cosmic Connections. I'm here with Christopher. We're going to be talking today about life's transitions astrologically and how we can maneuver through them from a physical sphere. So before we get into that, what's going on, Christopher? How's it going?
What's going on? Well, life is life. Everything is just about writing that freaking book. So that's what's going on for me.
Yeah, well,
writing.
Tell us what your book contains for people that
So
might
the
not
book is going to be the definition of the 360 vibrations. So it'll contain a let me see. Where do I have something here? So it'll contain the definition, the negatives on manifestations through the vibration. It'll deal with the fuel, the challenges, just different expressions that are there. It will tie the vibration into a tarot card. It will tie a vibration into the Sabian symbol. We'll go over the archetypal energy dynamics of the vibration that it ties to, which planets it ties to, what element it ties to. So we'll kind of laying all those things out. So that's what I've been doing. Just working on that and doing the research and just writing the book is what I've been doing. So it's taking up way too much time. I will tell you that straight off. That's no joke. Way too much time.
Do you have an ETA on when you're going to have it out?
Well, so I want to have it finished before the end of the year. And then I want to have it out sometime in the first part of next year. Hopefully by the conference is really when I want it to come out, right around the conference time. That would be in March. So that's the plan. That's what I'm shooting for. We'll see if I get it. I mean, hopefully I'll do it. Like, come on.
You're like, I've already spent weekends on it already.
Oh, it's ridiculous. I mean, it's just, you have to just like do it. You just have to do it. Get it done. So, yeah, it'll get there. So I'm fairly confident, not because like, oh yeah, this is going at a really good pace. No, it's because I just know if I have to do it, I'll do it. So, that's kind of what I'm going for.
Yeah, that makes sense though. That really does make sense. And I mean, I understand it's just pushing yourself to, keep going, and you'll eventually get there. There's only 360.
Yeah, it's only 360. I mean, already, as you know, like we've already done all the foundation of it. So I've already done a lot of the groundwork for it. So now it's just moving through. I'm hoping that through the summer I can get it, the second phase of the definitions done, and then we'll move into the third phase, which is that kind of final linking a lot of different research with it, the extreme case studies with it, attaching some people to some of the different vibrations and whatnot, and just go through there. So it'll be fine. It'll be really good. I already know it's everything I've been using on it. It's been great. So I'm already using a lot of the information, a lot of the definitions, using that in my practice, and so far so good. So I'm very excited about it.
Yeah, it sounds really exciting. And I think that's one of the things with vibrational astrology. If you don't know it, you might go, well, what is that? And it's not something that has been around for millennia, like looking at just traditional astrology. So it's kind of a newer concept. So it's something you might understand harmonics a little or not, who knows? But I think this will help to open that up to more people, which is great. So I'm excited to see it.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the reality is it's about the relationship between planets. That's really what it is. So whether you take a trine or an opposition or a square, these are what we know from what we would call the first vibrational chart, which is the natal chart, is the Aries 1 first vibration chart. And so what we look at is through the 360, we just are going to look at 360 charts, and what kind of especially conjunctions is kind of what you want to see. So what kind of 3 planet conjunctions do you have, and do you have one, and is it tight within 1, 2, 3 degrees? Is it like that? Because if it's 3, it's going to be a factor. If it's 2, it's a major factor. If it's 1, it is a big time factor. So if you have a 1 degree, which often people do, they'll have a 1 degree conjunction of 3 planets in a particular vibration. It just kicks that vibration off something fierce, and it becomes a descriptive of the planetary pattern is what it is. So it's like all that juice is going through that particular dynamic that displays as a conjunction in that vibrational chart. But in the natal chart, it will be a different kind of it will be connected, but not in something you're going to just offhand see. You're literally going to have to go through 360 different kind of types of, or at least 180 different types of connections. So yeah,
Interesting.
yeah. So
Yeah.
it's there in the natal. It just,
Right.
the amount
Because
of
you
time it's going to
yeah,
take to get to it is forever, where this cuts really, when you're dealing with different methods, you're talking about cutting the time down to find the answer. That's what you're dealing with. It's not that the
it's
answer isn't
precision
there.
too.
Yes,
Yeah. Just
it's
getting it
speed
more
and
precise
precision.
and
Well, you could do it in the natal. It's just going to take you forever to find that. And what's going to make it stand out? It's not going to stand out right away. Where when you do the vibrational chart, it's going to stand out immediately. Like you're going to go look, what are the strong vibrations? You can look right down and you can find it within a minute. You can already find the strongest. Where the other
right.
way, it's going to take you days, literally days to find it. So that's
It's
all.
true. And so my thought process on this is really interesting when I think about, my path with astrology, knowing traditional modern astrology before starting school, learning about vibrational astrology. I knew about harmonics a little bit, but not much. And then understanding that it is just a derivative of the natal chart. It's just a blown up
Yeah.
version of it. Kind of it clicked for me. And I think that I like the fact that it's so precise, giving you an opportunity to see something like quick, like you said, where you just nail it and it just makes
Yeah.
sense. It helps the person to understand themselves or the astrology part of it a little bit more than poking around like the natal chart trying to figure out what works. So I'm glad you're
Absolutely.
doing this book. Yeah, this
Yeah.
will help, I think.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
that's what it is. It's a matter of coming up with things that you can do faster than, and it's more precise, it's got greater speed, and you have the ability to see it. Everything's about the ability to see. Like, can I do that? So, even taking the concepts, really what you're dealing with is you're dealing with planets. That's all we're really dealing with. We're looking at the relationship of planets. Now, on top of that, we add signs where really, what's a sign? You're looking at a relationship between planet and stars. That's all a sign is the relationship between the planet and stars. Now, in the book, it actually will link the star that's linked to you. So it'll link the star that's linked to the particular vibration. So that's a thing. Then what are you doing? What's a house? Well, a house is a degree. Where is it in the degrees? From 1 to 360.
Right.
So in the vibrations, it actually deals with all those things. It has all those things and taking them into account. And that's what we're doing when we're looking at, Sun square Mars in the 11th house in Pisces. Okay, so fine, you're reading Pisces, you're reading the 11th house, you're reading the sun, you're reading Mars, you're reading a square. These are all the factors you have to read. Well, basically most of that's all cut out. It's already done within the vibration, so you don't have to read all that. It kind of
Right.
does it for you. Yeah. So
Yeah, it just makes it more direct.
yeah,
And I think that's important for people, that maybe don't understand it to know. So I love the book.
yeah,
I can't wait till it's fully completed.
yeah. Awesome.
So today we're going to talk about different cycles. So we all go through cycles in our life, of course, just even without astrology, but we're going to talk about different cycles that we go through and how you can maneuver through them. So one of the things, the first one that I made a note of is a Jupiter return. Do you ever think about the Jupiter return? Do you ever, well, maybe on any of them, do you ever think about like the return of any planet? I know you think about the progressed moon, the progressed lunar
Yeah.
return. That's a big one. But in terms of Jupiter, like I always try to keep track of when I have a return like that with the outer planets specifically, or, like Jupiter or Saturn, obviously. So, because I think that there's something in that. In fact, the last time that I had a Jupiter return, it was Saturn and Jupiter return on the same day. So they
Oh,
conjuncted on, yeah. on the same day on my so I said that wrong. Actually, they conjuncted on my sun on the same day. That wasn't a return. However, Jupiter returns, I think it gives you a chance to follow your path of expansion around, while Jupiter is taking the 12 years it takes to go around the chart. And when you have like markers, so to speak, you have the return, you have a square, opposition, another square, and then the return again, and it's like another pattern. Do you ever pay attention to that kind of
Well, I
thing?
guess I will this year, since my Jupiter return is next month. So April
Wow. Well,
24th.
there you
Yeah.
go. I must
Yeah.
have known that somewhere.
April 24th will be my Jupiter return. So we'll see.
Wow. That's my nephew's
yeah.
birthday.
Oh,
All
okay.
right.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I mean, for me, and it's a 12-year cycle, so
Mhm.
half the way around would be 6 years, of course, obviously, and then a quarter of that would be the square, which would be. So I think it's cool when you look at it, and you can look at it retroactively, look at your life in the
Oh,
past and what
absolutely.
places it was.
Well, that's, I think, how you really learn about it, and you can learn what it does when you look at it retroactively. That's how I've learned about the
Yeah,
vast
me
majority
too.
of transits. Is
Yeah.
yeah, I used to journal all the time, so it really ended up helping out when I got into astrology, because I could go back and, okay, what happened last time I was here? What happened last time this took place, and does it make sense? So yeah.
And the one that I think is even more, I guess because it's not as benefic, if you will. People think of Jupiter as benefic, although I think it can be good and bad, is the Saturn return. So that happens about 29 years old, give or take a little bit of time, depending on when you were born, how the speed of Saturn at the time of your birth and such. Do you ever pay attention to Saturn returns, the Saturn opposition, and so on? Like, is that something that you?
Oh yeah, I'm in a Saturn return right now, so.
Oh yeah, you are Saturn. I forgot.
Yeah.
It's your third. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah. So yeah, of course. Especially I remember my first Saturn return very distinctly. It was actually really good. So I had a really enjoyable, I would say, Saturn return. For me, it was coming into a time of married, having kids, and feeling really good about life. And like, yeah, I feel good about who I am. That's what my Saturn return was. So it was very positive. Um, I didn't feel the strain of the responsibility. I felt really good about it. So yeah, that was really good. Where my last Jupiter return, which was, wait a minute. So no, that was 2 ago. So 2 times Jupiter ago was in 2000. And that was we had moved. We actually had moved we were right in the middle of moving from Seattle to Jacksonville. So it was a big shift, obviously.
Yeah.
And this actually took place, the literal perfection of that took place a week before we left Seattle.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Wow. And you're totally expanding yourself to the other side of the country. That's really interesting. Wow. Yeah. I mean, I think that when you look at these cycles in your life, you can help yourself to maneuver through them. And you made a great point, Christopher, because your Saturn return was wonderful. I had a very challenging Saturn return, but I think what was going on in my life in that time was that I was not headed quite in the right direction for myself. And so things shifted for me. So I had kind of no choice to kind of hit, like, if you will, a space where I had to make a change, and the change allowed me to grow into, the next part of my path, if you will, as a human. So I think that, it depends on where you're at with yourself. And you made a good point when we were talking about this, what we were going to talk about today, saying that depends on what's going on in the sky when you're also having these aspects.
Absolutely. Yeah, because my first one, well, going back 2 times of my Jupiter, was we moved here. The second one is when I began the class with David Cochran in Vibrational Astrology. That was in 2010.
Wow. I mean, hello.
Yeah.
That's
And
really cool.
and now I'm about to go through my third one next month.
Wow. So it's next month your
Next
Jupiter
month is
return.
my
Wow.
third one. Yeah. So from these
Wow.
three.
From
Yeah.
these three, right? Because that
Yeah.
happens every 12 years, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, it's a pattern to think about and how you can maneuver through things, hopefully in a good way, so that the Jupiter return giving you an opportunity for expansion, growth of some sort,
Well,
digging
what
into.
it's going to be is here I am writing smack dab in the middle of writing this freaking book in this one, which is that's a thing. So
Exactly. That's a big
yeah.
one.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's all these like, and you're right. It's like Jupiter's going to expand, and it's so there's a factor of things that are uncomfortable, but you still do it. Like, but it's a little like it's stretching you. So when we moved from like we were very comfortable in Olympia, like in the Seattle area. We were very comfortable. Life was going great. We had so when we moved in 2000, we just had Derek a year before. So we had 8 children, and our youngest, Derek, was 1 year old when we moved. And we had a business going that had grown tremendously over the past, and I was dropping all that. So I was leaving everything we had built for. I left it. So because I wanted to grow in not so much in like the physical, like business, like, you get to a point where, okay, you can do it and you're okay. So this is what it takes to have a certain amount of success. And it's like, oh, who
Hmm.
cares? Like, who cares? Like, this doesn't have a lot of meaning to me. So it didn't. It really just didn't have a lot of meaning. So I wanted something more in the spiritual life and in the churches. So that's why we came to Jacksonville. That's what we wanted to do. So that was an expansion. Then going into the classes, so I had begun to study and sort of learn about astrology, but I knew I needed a teacher to really advance to the next step, to really advance it, and that's when I got involved with David in the second Jupiter. And now here we are, and you know how much I don't really want to write this book. I really don't want to, like, nothing. I don't want to do it. It's a lot of freaking work, and it's just not I don't like it, but I'm stuck doing it, and I'm going to do it. And again, it's one of those things of you just have to do it. You're being pushed to expand and go into areas that are uncomfortable.
Hmm.
And okay, I'll do it. I'll do it. I don't want to, but I don't and I do. So part of me does, or I wouldn't do it. But it's like, why bother?
It's a lot of work, but I think, we have built our our understanding of astrology from history and past astrologers. And astrology is just like that. Everything in the world is like that. But when you think about it, it's probably bigger than the will of not wanting to do it. Although I can understand what you're
Yeah.
saying, just that
Yeah,
this is a
it is. So
lot.
it's like it's there, but again, to tell you the truth, I hadn't even looked to see where my Jupiter was. So this is like, as we're doing this, just so everybody knows, this is not, oh, we had prepared this, and oh, hell no, we didn't prepare squat.
No, it's
So
usually just a topic, and I just go.
yeah, we're just like talking, and I'm looking, I've got my chart in front of me. So I'm like, okay, let me see what was happening. I'm like, oh, okay, I'm
And
ready
one
to
thing I
Jupiter
think
return here.
Yeah, one thing I think is really cool to think about when you're thinking about a return in your chart, you can think about, well, for instance, Jupiter, it's hitting your natal Jupiter exactly. And then it's also connecting with all the other things in your natal chart and your vibration charts. So that, whatever Jupiter, your natal Jupiter is hitting, like if you have a strong midpoint or something like that going on, it's connecting with that. It's like amplifying it. So there is like a, a vibration, if you will, an energy that kind of goes out that enhances the person of yourself. That's the way I kind of see it. And I think if you're not, this is my experience with my Saturn return specifically, thinking about it from this perspective, is that if you're not in alignment with where the direction you're supposed to go, things will shift for you. Things will
Yeah,
kind of, and Saturn is
I
that
agree.
thing, that planet that will cut
I
things
agree.
off and get you into a different direction, but all of them do that. And the inner planets, of course, because they move so much slow or quicker, you'll have a Mercury return like every 88 days. I don't ever pay attention to that, to be honest with you. I don't really pay attention. I do the Venus return, which is about every 18 months. I'll just notice that. But other than that, I don't even think there's anything really strong with the inner planets when they make those returns and stuff, unless you have something strong going on in your natal chart with that planet, because it's quick. These outer planets, when they have these returns, squares, etc., you end up having a longer space of time when that's active in your life, therefore giving you an opportunity to shift and change. So it's just something to think about. Other planet returns and things like that. What would be the next one I would look at? I lost my spot.
Well, I mean, you have your Uranus opposition,
Yep.
which is a big one.
And that's about 42, 43 years
right around
old.
42, yes.
Yeah.
Uranus opposition. So
Yep.
I will say this too, just on the Saturn. So mine perfected on February 27th is when my Saturn return perfected. So if you think about it, that was just before the conference.
Yeah.
And smack dab and having to put that freaking starting of that book, getting all the definitions. So you can kind of see how these things play out, and the Saturn and the Jupiter are kind of working, like conspiring, So yeah, that's how I would see that. Now, Uranus. So yeah, whenever somebody is usually in their 41 time period, they're going through sort of a time in their life where they're being asked, are you being who you're supposed to be, who you're designed to be? Are you being you is really what's being asked. And if you're not, if you haven't been paying enough attention to Saturn or Jupiter or doing these things, it can kick you in the butt a little bit. So yeah, that's definitely a thing to me. So let me see.
Did you have any surprises or midlife things happening when your Uranus opposition was going on?
That's what I'm looking at now. Let me look at the exact date. I'm going to say that. Well, I have some suspicions about it, about what happened. So
it's interesting too, because I knew what a Saturn return was, sort of, when I was going through my Saturn return. I was into astrology, but not fully immersed in it like I am now. It's like takes up my whole life. but looking at it backwards, and after I had a specific event that changed like the trajectory of my experience on this earth, that really happened, I think, I want to say within 15 minutes of the last hit of the Saturn return. And I felt like, looking back, I remember thinking, something is going to change, but not knowing exactly what it is. And, when an event happens like that, I don't think it's necessarily one event. I think sometimes it takes multiple events that kind of get you into a space. Yeah, where it's like a change,
Yeah. There's a movement. I mean, sometimes you can have a catalyst event. Yeah. But it's almost never the first and only event. It's events that take place. So for me, it was January in 2007. So yeah, I know exactly what was taking place on my Uranus opposition. So this is when I just began to really get into astrology from my Christian background. Okay. So, we had come over here in 2000 to Jacksonville and been a part of a church. And I was really pursuing some of the sort of mystic elements of the Christian faith. And the group we were involved with, that ended up, again, we had some great experience, but that ended up ending, and not in a real super positive way, and so for me, it was a matter of what do I do? Like, how do you, I'm a very, I want stuff that's effective. So it's like being involved in church or having a relationship with God is not like, it's not a duty. It's not like, oh, you just have to put your time in and then that's the end of it. No, that's either it affects your life or it doesn't. And if it doesn't, why do it? So if it's not having a positive effect on your life, why would you even bother? That's my kind of the way I think about stuff. So if like church is just boring, and personally, do I go to church? I don't go to church. Why? Because it's freaking boring. Now, I'm not saying all churches are boring, but for me, it's boring. There's almost no interaction. There's just, it's just boring. So I don't do it. That's the reason I don't. Now, I went to church for, 40 something years of my life, like consistently all the time. So, do I think, oh, you don't need to do that? Well, no, if you find it interesting and you're getting something out of it, then by God, you should do it. It's
Right.
just, if you're not, like, I would suggest, if you're not getting stuff out of it, then don't do it. If you're practicing astrology and you're not getting anything out of it, stop. Why bother,
Right.
man? It's like,
Exactly.
there's no sense in it. You
Right.
should be getting something out of it or not. So this was a time when I got introduced and I began to delve into astrology. I began to study it myself at this point in time. Now, it will be between 2011 and 2012 when I hit that Jupiter return, when I actually go to class. But I start in 2007. I start researching, like, oh, this kind of works. And I start to get into it. Really, since then, I haven't stopped getting into it. It just keeps going. Okay. So, and that was that time. And that was my Uranus opposition. Now, also during that time was because, as you mentioned, the lunar phases and everything, which, yes, I'm definitely into following lunar phases, only because they work. Okay. So it's like,
Progressed lunar phases.
yeah, the progressed phase of the lunar moon, it like works. So that's the only reason I use it. It's not where, oh, I was taught this and it means so much to me and all this. No, I wasn't. So I really wasn't taught it at all. That's more of a self-taught thing, because we really didn't learn about that in the class. I think it was mentioned, but we didn't do any major study on that or anything. I just got into it because I noticed that during these particular times in the phase of the moon, it was affecting my life. Like, I was seeing that events had been happening during all these phases. So during the 2007, I was just going to run it real quick, but I'm pretty sure I'm at the end going towards either I'm in a new moon or I'm at the balsamic, or wait a minute. I think I'm in a new moon in 2007. So in 2007, oh no, I'm in my balsamic.
Wow. That's interesting.
I'm in my balsamic. So I'm at a Uranus opposition, my midlife opposition, and a balsamic. Okay. Wow. The new moon starts in 11. Okay. 2011. Just before. So I'm in my new moon when the Jupiter return is going to happen. I'm in my new moon. So you kind of see that it's really lining up really kind of nicely.
Right.
And I will say that balsamic and that Uranus opposition was way tougher than my Saturn returns. My Saturn returns were easy. My Uranus oppositions were not.
Right.
They were challenging, because going from being a Christian minister into an astrologer is not like an easy shift.
No, that's not. It's like a whole different everything in your life, because you're not going to be like, hey, minister friend, guess what, I'm an astrologer. They're going to be like, what the heck are you doing, Ethan?
Yes. That's what, even though it really works really well together, but it's not people's perception.
No,
so
it's the majority of
so
people
you have to deal with that. And so here I'm at a Uranus opposition, which is, you need to be who you are. You need to be you. You need to be you. Okay. And I'm going through a balsamic. So it's like a devastating ending of a 30-year cycle. Now, when you really do the cycle, when I began that cycle, I was in Bible college.
Oh, interesting.
That's where I met my wife. Okay.
That's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
So it took the cycle from Bible college all the way to now I am going into astrology, instead of using the Bible as the main sort of mode of communication. It's now astrology becomes a mode of communication, which, being a Mercury or a Gemini ascendant, the idea of the mode of communication is very important for me. How I communicate becomes a major factor. So the cycles, it's not just a matter of looking at one cycle. You have to look at, okay, where's the moon? What's happening during that time? And because I'm sure that if I had had a Uranus opposition and I was coming into my full moon, it's a very different situation.
Yeah.
It's handled very differently, probably for the idea of Saturn as well. If I'm in my Saturn return and I'm in a balsamic, very different than if let's say I'm in my Saturn return and at a full moon. Like, that's going to be completely different because they're trying to serve different purposes, really. It still wants to get you to know who you are in a sense, but in the full moon, it's coming out in a very positive, like it's not stripping things away as much
Right.
as it will in a balsamic. It's really stripping you down. So I don't know. How about you?
Interesting. Yeah, I mean that is really interesting. My Uranus opposition. I looked up the dates. It's really uncanny. Some of the dates. It was in 2017 and 18. I had 3 hits of it. I was traveling so much more than I've ever done in my life. And I know we talked about traveling before. I'm not very much of a traveling person, but I was driving to Michigan, and I live in Florida multiple times. I don't even know how many times. It was just a lot of stuff going on, movement like that going on in my life, where I'm more of the person who grows roots in the place where I live, just how I operate. So it was very disturbing on that level, but it wasn't bad. It was all really good stuff because I was enjoying that free-spirited type of thing. It was different than what I normally am. But it was I mean, I feel like that was the prelude to a lot of stuff that, changes that happened after that. So in 2000, one of the hits of it, the last one was April 2018, and I was actually at the UAC conference. I want to say it was April and May. I was at the conference. I can't remember exactly when it happened, but that was a totally different experience for me too. Just traveling to Chicago with a friend and just going to like a huge astrology conference. I mean, that was one event, but like there was many different things that were shifting in my life during that time too. So I think it was really interesting, and it kind of put me into a space of changing different things about myself, kind of growing into something that was different, being a little bit less caring about what other people think and doing what is more important to me, and I think that's what Uranus opposition kind of does for you.
So that was your Uranus opposition from 2016 to 2017?
17 to 18.
Yeah. Oh, 17 to 18. Okay.
Yep.
All right. Yep. Yeah. And so, and you're, it looks like you're at looks like the waxing gibbous. So you have a growing kind of, it's more of a positive dynamic for that. Yeah. Well, my Uranus was not it was in a closing dynamic. So it was more devastating in that way. Yeah. Where your Saturn was most likely. What year was your Saturn return?
And you know what I was just thinking of? It just hit me. So that was 2002.
Which in 2002, you're in your balsamic.
Exactly. I was just thinking that, like, your balsamic, or not your balsamic, but your progressed moon and your Saturn phase they're almost synchronistic, So when because they're about 28 years.
Well, they're synchronistic in the way that, but yours is in a negative, like it's in a balsamic. It's like, of course you're not going to have a good, exactly. So of course you're not going to have a good Saturn return.
Yeah, but my point is, when you're born, if you're born under this
whatever moon you're born in, yes, it's going to come back there. Yeah.
Yeah, it might not be exact because depending on how fast Saturn moves, but it's close. Yeah, so you're going through this phase, exactly. So it's interesting.
So we're actually reversed. Where your moon is when Uranus was in the opposition is where my moon was when Saturn was returning.
That's interesting.
That's why for me the Saturn return was great. You not so much, but your Uranus opposition is fine. No, not really. Okay, so that's why you can't just take a Uranus, this is what it means. It'll be a challenge, but it's not always perceived as a bad, like, oh, that's really going to be bad. No, not. It depends on kind of where your moon cycle is.
Yes. I want to see when. Do you remember? Oh, it was September 10th. Hurricane Irma hit. So I live in South Florida. Like
Oh, what
not
year?
in the Keys. 2017, but mine was actually, that's when
Mm,
I decided I'm not staying here for this
mm.
hurricane. I boarded up and I like left, and that was on the 10th of September the hurricane hit, and that I
Yeah,
a
you
few
had
days
the
before that.
waxing
My
gibbous
Yeah,
there.
my first Uranus opposition was September 18th, so I'm sure it was probably up north at that point. Point being, like, a hurricane came, and here I am, like, I'm not saying I've lived in hurricanes my whole life, but for some reason there was something about that one. I was just like, I'm leaving.
Move on.
It looks scary. Just get out of
Yeah,
here, like, so
yeah.
it's
And
interesting
that
that
was a
that happened.
whole, I mean, that to me is a whole time of tweaking things. Like you're tweaking. It's not wholesale, like it's tweak stuff that goes on during that, You're like, okay,
Right.
let me do this, let me do that. But
Well,
it's not
that
as
event,
devastating.
yeah, that event happened, and it changed the trajectory of my life for a couple of years too, because going up,
Hmm.
and that one trip that I went up north during,
Uh-huh.
for that hurricane, definitely changed different things in my life.
Yeah,
So it's
opened up.
interesting that it
Yeah,
was
it opened
great.
up more stuff. Yeah.
Yep.
Awesome.
Like new pathways.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, it ended in the idea of going to the last one was going to the UAC conference.
Hmm.
So yeah. So okay, so we went over Uranus opposition. What
Saturn,
about, yeah, well, wait a second. What about Neptune, the Neptune square? That
Neptune.
happens
Yeah.
usually a little before your it's about 40 years old. That happens a little before your Uranus opposition, but it is an important part to it. We don't get a Neptune return, of course, but we get a square. And if we live long
Yeah.
enough, we get an opposition. Did you notice anything like that when you had your
I
Neptune? You
am
probably
just
look at the
looking at it
dates.
now to
Mm-hmm.
see what happened. Because that would have been not all that long ago, I don't think.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's about age 40.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Again, not all that long ago.
I mean, that was like 40 years ago. I'm just kidding.
Oh my God.
That's
Um,
funny.
all right. Let's see. So yeah, so that would have been um okay, let me December. Oh,
Probably the
yeah.
year or
That's
so
when
before.
so my Neptune square was in '07, almost the same time. That's when a lot of things are changing. That's
Yeah.
when I'm getting into astrology. Things I'm in my balsamic moon. I'm actually when that's happening, I'm going through, let me see. My let's see. Saturn is in an opposition. I'm also in a Saturn opposition then. So I've got a
Mm.
Saturn opposition. I've got uh, a Neptune square. I've got a balsamic moon. Yeah. So you're thinking this is good? Nice time? Sweet. Oh, no, not so
It's
nice.
not
Not so
fluffy
nice.
pink clouds.
No, no. It's unsure, which if you know me, I'm not a really unsure person. Okay.
Mhm.
So I'm like, I'm not unsure. I like make decisions, done, go. I was very unsure about stuff at this time.
Hmm,
So there was a
that's
lot of,
interesting.
yeah, that sort of that, and looking at it, it's like, oh, Neptune square, that can produce some, you're not clear on things.
Yeah, almost a little bit of a delusion kind of energy where you're not really
Absolutely.
able to see
Absolutely.
clearly.
Yeah.
Yep.
Although I don't like, so the delusion is a negative connotation. It
Yeah.
can also be that, so one of the things that it can do is it can be a delusion buster. You can all of a
Mm.
sudden become aware that things you have thought are delusional. So to me, it can work both ways. So it can either put you into a delusion or break you free of a delusion.
Mhm.
That's how I would see
Give
Neptune,
you an opportunity to look
to where
well.
you can actually, oh my God, this is delusional. Okay. So,
Mhm.
yeah, that's some of the stuff that was going on during, that would have been that time. Yeah. December 17th, 2007.
Yeah.
Ah,
Interesting. Yeah, I had mine 2015 and 16 when mine happened. That was we graduated in
Mm.
2015, so there
Oh
was a
yeah.
whole different shifts of things going on
Yeah,
in the
yeah.
world.
Well, that's interesting. How would you think that you were dealing with that at that point?
So I was going through a lot of like physical things. I had surgery on my neck when we started school. Actually, the day that we started school, which was also an interesting time for me. I had an injury to my neck, and I went through surgeries for the 2 years prior to the Neptune square happening. And then I think it was just kind of like adjusting back into normal life, because when you have an injury that does something where it changes you like that. It was on my spine, so it's not like a little thing. Like I cut my finger and I needed a stitch or something. It kind of gives you just a different appreciation for life, and I think that's where my letting go of worries, letting go of fear. I also went through, my father passed away the year prior, so it's like a part of just kind of growing into a person that you are without a parent that you're close to or something like that. There was a lot of different but major events that happened just leading up to this. So
Right.
and I feel like it kind of brings it, for me, it brought in a space of needing to step into the realm of like, this is me where I want to be, as opposed to kind of working because you're dealing with an injury or you're dealing with something other outside of you, if that makes sense. So I can see
Right.
the idealized aspect of Neptune playing in there. And
Right.
then I had the freedom that came with the Uranus opposition that happened in the following years. So
Okay.
it's,
Okay. That
yeah,
would
I
make
can see that
sense.
playing out. Hmm.
So you're seeing it more as a freeing time than that it really ultimately probably Neptune was playing a freeing aspect there. Yeah, that would be
Yeah, like
interesting.
yeah, and maybe the idealistic thing of Neptune. Neptune is ideals, and that can be good or bad, depending on what your ideals are.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Kind of letting go of those things and transitioning into who you are or want to be and the place you want to be. I could see that happening. Um, so yeah, Neptune square. So that's interesting. I would love to hear anybody that has any thoughts about what went on with them during these times. That would be interesting to hear. And
Yeah. And then the other one is the of course the Chiron return.
Mhm.
That's also to me a fairly significant one. Um,
Yep, I definitely think the Chiron return is a significant one. I mean, so I'm in my Chiron return still. It's already passed, but I'm still very close to it. What are
mm.
you going to tell me about, to my future self, about the Chiron return? I
Ah,
can look back and go, yeah, that was me.
well, like to me, Chiron is the gifting or the charisma, the special gifting that has to be broken out of you. So it doesn't. I don't think the Chiron gifting just comes out. It sort of has to be. It has to be broken out. That's how I kind of view Chiron.
Hmm.
And let me see. I want to see my exact date for that. So mine, my Chiron return was in 2016, January 2016.
Hmm.
So, and in January 2016, because what we had graduated the year before, correct? Yeah, it had
Yep,
been the year before we graduated.
2015.
And to me, when I graduated, like, although, well, I didn't feel like I knew a whole lot. So,
Then you got in the real world and realized you did. No.
well, no, not exactly. So at first, you're sort of like, um, you've got, how would I say this? Like, so I have a Virgo moon. So my standards of what needs to be are kind of a little high. When I think that a person knows something, like, okay, you better know it. Like, not just be good, you better be like tops. Like, that's just it's a crazy assessment, but it's how I assess a lot of stuff. Like, you really need to know it. So, of course, coming out of there, did I know everything about astrology? No. So obviously I don't know hardly anything. This is my thinking. I have to learn all these other things. So I started to do that. But what happened during this time is I ended up, I think this was when I went to a conference. And this was not an astrology conference. I went there, it was being set up, and I ended up, the conference was not going that well. The speaker was not doing that good. And I'm like, which I hate, because it's like, everybody's come out and they're not doing that well. So you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to do readings for these like 50 people. And I'm going to do them on this. I'm going to have to do them on the spot. Okay. Now, with vibrational astrology at the time, you prep. You did not do readings like on the spot. That's just not how you did it.
We didn't have the software for it, that capability.
No, and we didn't have it with the way we did it with vibrational astrology. You had to look all that stuff up. You're not just going to like, boom, one to the next to the next. You're not going to do that. So I got myself into a situation because of my Virgo, to where, this is sucking. I've got to try to redeem this thing. So let me do that. Let me offer free. I'm just going to do readings for everybody. Okay. So I go to do that, and I am plowing through them, and they came out really good. And even one person was an astrologer that was there, and she complimented, that was a fantastic reading. Well, that's the first time I'd ever done anything like that.
Wow.
I had done some on the spot, but nothing like 50 on the spot, like one after the other. Next. I did it for like 2 days, 25, 25 the next, just right after the other. And it came out good. My Virgo would have kept me from ever doing that if I had just let it, because it's like, you're not going to nail it. You're not going to get it 100%. So you shouldn't even do it. And that had plagued me for most of my life. The idea of, you're going to preach. Well, you need to write a freaking book before you say anything. That's literally what in my mind that I have to do, because I have to prove everything. So it's not just a matter of presenting things and letting people say what they think. No, you have to back it all up. So the amount of research I would have to do for one 45-minute speech, it was unreal. Like I would write, it would be no problem to do 100 pages. Like, I'll have that much information. Now, how many people will ask about those things? Nobody's going to ask, but it didn't matter. In my being, I let that cripple me. Okay.
Yeah.
And what happened at this particular event was it broke me of that. And so that's where I look at the idea of the breaking of Chiron. Like, there's a gifting in you, and there are things that are keeping you from. So the Virgo dynamic was keeping me because it was demanding it be perfect. And so it's never going to be perfect. So it can't come out. And
that's a good point.
Because what it happened was, because I wanted people to feel like they got value, that element within me forced me to go beyond the element of Virgo within me. And
well, that's almost a Virgo thing, to want people to have value, like the service of something.
Yes,
so it just shifted.
It can be a double-edged sword, but
Yeah.
It's like it came and it broke, and it allowed the Mercury Aries to completely flow, and within the operation of astrology. And that was it. That was the end of it. It's never been an issue since, as you know. Like, now I will talk at the drop of a hat. It doesn't matter.
Right.
Like, and that's what happened. That's what happened. That's why, I'm a talker, but you didn't know I was a talker during all of our school days.
No, I'm not at all.
I wasn't.
Like, I became aware of that really during the first conference in 2019. I was like, oh, okay. So
that's after 2016, after Chiron broke.
Yes. I was like, I know a different level of him now. Okay, got it. It was just different. Yeah.
Yeah. And so that to me was that? So that was 2016 when my Chiron return happened after
Mm,
we graduated. Yeah.
wow.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
I
that's
just
what
had
it was for me.
my Chiron return. There was two hits last year, and the last one was this year in February. And
Mm.
I'm in a I just left my full moon. I think a progressed full moon phase. I think if I remember it correctly.
Mm-hmm.
So and I
Yeah.
think it's time of opening, being something more confident. Maybe I think that probably works, and that like when you think about it, more confidence with the Chiron return. Would you say that's a thing?
Oh, absolutely. That's a thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's because it's a charisma. It's a gifting. So whenever we talk, well, we use the word, oh, they're very charismatic. Okay. So
Hmm.
it's a special thing. It's a special ability that everybody possesses a special ability, but they don't get to use it at birth. Like it's something that
Broke open.
it has to be broken out of you. It has to come out, and it comes out at, again, around that 50 years old is when that thing breaks and comes out, when Chiron returns, and it makes sure to snap it. So that's how, for me, that's how I look at all that kind of stuff. And where's your Chiron? What sign's it in? What?
Aries.
Oh, it's in Aries. Okay.
Hmm.
Okay. And what
Yeah, I
house?
just had February. What was it? February 17th. I think it was the last hit of the Chiron return for me.
Mm.
It might have
It's
been
Aries.
February
Which house?
7th.
Seventh house.
Oh no, it's the 12th house actually.
Oh, 12th house. Okay.
Hmm.
Oh, interesting. Interesting. So
Yeah,
Aries in the 12th?
yep. That's interesting because I didn't know, but I also had the North Node and Chiron conjunct the same day. It was my Chiron return.
Hmm.
That's it. That is
Hmm.
interesting.
So to me, how I would read that is there is within the realm of the mystic, within the realm of that which is non-corporeal, non-physical, there's an adventurous spirit. There's something about taking things to another level. And I would think that within your tarot reading, I would that could really, I would look at that as, sort of kicking up, getting to a more dynamic like level, and
Mhm.
even astrological readings, anything that deals from the sort of that spirit, that undefined realm, that
Because of the
sort of
12th house. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, because of the 12th. Yeah. So, but and then you've got that event, that Aries, the adventure, So I'm
Hmm.
thinking that it would kind of work in that way. Um, so, and
Interesting.
you've been way more active, way
Yeah.
more, talking and doing things in that way. Way
Yeah.
more than
Yeah.
before.
Definitely. There has been a shift in that direction for sure
Mm.
within my life, and I can see the idea of the confidence or the charisma coming forward as well. Being
Yeah.
less, maybe it's more less observant of the self and more observant of just everything
Well,
outside
it's
of the
that you
self, if that
can,
makes sense.
if you can, yeah. So, again, charisma it has a certain, yeah, it's definitely dealing in confidence. It's dealing in, how that's going to manifest. I mean, for you, it's, if we look to your Neptune, it's that Sagittarian quality there in your Neptune. And so, and it's in the seventh house. So it's in a relational kind of dynamic,
Mm.
that you are eclectic, you're interested in this or interested in that. I mean, you've gone down different paths. You're in the magic course. You're doing different things that way. So that,
Hmm.
because I think it's going to tie that element in, because like for me, it broke my Mercury in Aries. It let that come out. Okay, that's what Chiron did. It really took that Mercury in Aries to another level. All right. And for you, it's like, what is it taking to another level? It's not always, Chiron isn't taking always itself, it's enabling, what is it doing? How is it doing that? What is it breaking free? So Yeah.
Right. That makes sense. And the last thing that happens that I figured we would talk about on this episode is it happens at different times in people's lives is the Pluto square. And the reason it happens at different times in your life because Pluto's path around the sun is an oblong path. I mean, all of them are ellipses, but this one's really stretched out compared to the other planets. So mine happened. It can happen from about age, what is it, 36 to 50? Is that right? Yeah, about 36 to 50 is what I wrote down. So, and it's like letting go of old patterns, kind of having a fundamental change in yourself because it can be kind of compulsive. Pluto can be kind of compulsive. So it's a shift in your direction, if you will, And I actually had mine in the end of 2011. So I want to say that was about the time when David and Faye ended up, putting the classes, like offering them to be in the following year. And that was when I was like, oh, I'm going in this direction. Because I remember when that the year changed to 2012. I was already signed up for the classes and stuff like that, so I knew what I was going to do, and it was just like, okay, this is where the direction I'm going to go in. I finally know, because I would have liked to have gone to the physical school, but I live like 5 hours from where the physical school was. So when I got the program, that's how I met David and Faye in the early 2000s. And they were doing the physical classes. I said, why don't you put them online? And Faye was like, we're working on it. We're doing this first. So I always followed them. And then there it was. So there was like this transition for me. I mean, if you want to think about obsession and things that you go through, like I've definitely absorbed myself into merge with astrology as much as I can since that moment, that time. But when was your Pluto square?
So my Pluto was square in 2000. At the end of 2001 is when my Pluto was square. So we had moved to Florida. I was in the church that we had moved for, and it was really a fantastic time. So this was moving me into the realm of more of a mystical kind of, from a theological base into a mystical base. This was like the establishment of that. And what I mean by that is, so a lot of the things I just held in my mind, like you understand the laws, you understand the theology. So theology is the idea of the study of God. It's the study of the unknown. And so you have theories that people take as beliefs, and they become established, and that's all that matters. And you base it almost like law. The Bible becomes like a law book that, well, no, this is this and this is that. And that's sort of how a lot of things were for me. That's how I operated. That's how my mind worked. Well, you can't do that because of this, or you do that because of this. You're like, okay, it's all law based. And what had happened over the previous 2 years to that is we had moved more into it. You can say heart based, spirit based. You're listening for stuff happening inside you, more from a heart kind of position, not so much a rational mind thought, but you're really wanting to get into the heart of the issue. When you think about a lot of why people do what they do, they don't really do it because of a rational mind. They do it because it's coming from another place. It's like people are not very rational. They can pretend to be rational, but they're not. It's not pure logic. It's like, you're doing this because of this, because your heart was broken, or you're shy, or whatever it may be. Okay. So this began to move into the experience of God, and when I say God, I'm dealing with that which we don't know. I mean, I'm, for the lack of words, I mean, the idea of God doesn't have a name. So because you can't contain that which is the everything that we don't know. Okay. So I'm using that in that way, more that way, less in a specific religious teaching way or a theological way. So began to engage in those experiences through, like, they would do stuff like pray reading and meditation and all these kinds of things. And it was I was having these major experiences, major impact And it was making my life, in a sense, better. There was a happiness and a joy and a contentment and a satisfaction that was really, really powerful. It was actually probably the best time I've ever had in church during those times. Like, this was people meeting together, really caring and loving each other. It didn't last that long. It lasted only a couple years, but it was the best 2 years of the church experience I've ever had. And it was really a breaking free of a lot of the structural conditioning that I had that
Mm,
made sense in my mind, that I thought that's what that meant, but not in my heart. For example, you can take teachings on hell and the lake of fire and all these kind of like eternal damnation kind of thoughts. And you can think, well, that makes sense. One person goes this way, another person goes that way. Like, we're very dualistic in that way. But it's like you start thinking and you're like, well, there's nothing I could do that I would ever want to send my kids to eternal torment, and that would bother me. But God wants to do that. Yeah, like, you're like, man, something doesn't seem right about that. Like, that. Now, it doesn't make sense that everybody can just do whatever the hell they want and it doesn't matter. That doesn't make sense either. But it doesn't make sense that, okay, nothing, like, you have no shot, like you're damned forever. That doesn't make sense. But, like, how do you put that together theologically? Okay, so these are like the dilemmas I have. And then you begin to engage God in spirit, as it were, and you're realizing, yeah, hell, that's not right. Even though I don't understand it theologically at the time, I don't know how to make sense of it theologically. I don't believe it anymore. Like, that just doesn't make sense. I'm not going to hold to that. I'm going to hold to what my heart says, not what my mind says. And that was what was going on during that my Pluto square. So it was an
like
evolving
immersion.
from overthinking, over trying to rationalize or think things through to understand them from a brain aspect, to a, like even the scriptures say, as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he, not his mind. So it's that
Mm.
kind of thing was going on. So yeah, that's what was
So it
happening.
sounds like you had an immersion of sorts in the church in
Oh,
that
most
time. Like,
definitely.
you
Oh, most
completely
definitely.
immerse yourself in that. And I
Oh,
went
big
back
time.
because I had more than one. Maybe everybody does, Pluto square. Yeah, I think everybody would, because Pluto doesn't move that far in the sky every year.
Yeah.
Anyway, it was in 2011. It was early 2011, and three of them throughout that year. That's when I bought my house too, and that
Mm.
changed a lot of things for me. And immersion of, like, being a homeowner for the first time in my life, and then preparing to go to school, which was another trajectory change in and of itself. So there was a lot of different things that were happening for me during that time too. It sounds like you definitely immersed yourself in that feeling
Oh,
of
big time.
being
Big time.
connected to God in that way
Yeah.
too. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Big time. Big time. I mean, immersion would be a good word. Um,
Hmm.
because we would get up early in the morning, we'd gather together for meditation times. We would do it at night. Because everybody in the church lived everybody bought houses in the same neighborhood. So it was all a community in the neighborhood. So
Oh,
so you could do everything really quick. Like, so it wasn't, it's like, oh, let's go and let's just spend a little half hour just being quiet, together. Okay, you could do that when everybody lives side by side. You can't do that if you
right.
have to get in the car, drive to a thing. Like, yeah, no one's going to do that. So that was part of
Oh,
the
that's
reason.
interesting.
So yeah, it was very, like I said, it was literally the best church experience that I have ever had, before or since. Okay, so that was amazing. Again, it ended as most things do, but it
Right.
doesn't mean that it was any less special or any less,
Right.
like, wow, I still wouldn't trade it for anything. Um,
Yeah, that's a good point, because those special moments, they may not last, but they leave lingering things in us that carry
Big
with us
time.
throughout. Yeah.
Absolutely. You start tasting things and then you yearn for it. You taste it.
Hmm.
You have an experience that is really extremely meaningful and powerful, and you just want it again. And so you begin to chase after these kind of things, like, what did that mean? How did, and, and over time you can do that. And I've done that, and I've experienced similar things to that. Um, and even greater things than that. But I would never do that if I hadn't had that experience.
Mhm.
It's
Mhm.
it's like you can appreciate, and you take and you walk through, and you can appreciate these things. And astrology gives a chance to give it voice, to understand it in a context as we're talking about, in cycles,
Mhm.
and to sort of relate to those. One, if you know what's coming, or in retrospect, to look back on, and you kind of
Mhm.
see, okay, how that works. And for me, I think a lot of the transits in my life have been, as I reflect back, they've been fairly clear. But I think there's a reason for that, because my path has been to be an astrologer. So it's like, it needs to be clear. I need to be able to communicate the kind of things that can
Mhm.
happen
Yeah.
in these events in a clear way, you know? And so to experience them in oftentimes quite dramatic ways, they've been fairly dramatic and easy to
Mhm.
see, like, you know,
Right, just doing
um,
it like we've done this past
yes,
hour or
it's,
whatnot. It's fair, and that's been my experience working with the transits like we just did, talking to clients, even if they're past a certain thing. Well, what happened to you during your Saturn return? Telling them when that was. Usually it's like, oh my God, this,
yes,
oh my God, that, so it's like, it's definitely an experience we both had of our own. But I think most people can recognize these different patterns in their life. And I think
absolutely.
it's good to know beforehand, but if you don't know beforehand, you can
Yeah.
understand it at least maybe on a deeper level and
Well, you
retroactively
know
why
what
you
to,
went through
like, because
that.
you explain from your own, like, because we all have our own personal experience, and almost nothing's more powerful than the fact that, okay, what was that like for you? Again, as
Right.
we kind of looked at, and just talking to you right now, seeing that the moon cycle affects it. So it's like, it can
Yeah.
be very different for different moon cycles. That's an awareness to have. And it just has confirmed it to me, just in our conversation here, how, oh, look, your Uranus was very different, your opposition, than mine, and vice versa in the Saturn, like, because of the moon cycles. But
Yeah.
it's like, just understanding the nature and the movement is there. And then even looking at and realizing, oh, next month is the perfection of the Jupiter return. And it's like, well, am I thinking that makes sense? That, yes, I'm thinking that makes sense with everything that's going on and all that. I mean, you can kind of see it. Um,
Hmm.
it doesn't mean that you like, okay. The other thing is, like, I would reflect back on this probably 5 or 6 or 7 years from now very differently than I'm looking at it now. Okay.
Hmm.
Because in 7 years, you see the end result of stuff. Right now,
Hmm.
I'm not. I'm seeing the work, okay? The losing all the weekends, not being able to go out in the boat, not being able to do squat, you know? Um, yeah, and it's
Yeah,
not,
because you're focused in on this thing that you're trying to do,
I
and
got to get it done.
Jupiter will
Yep.
help you grow that out into the world. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's really
exactly.
interesting.
It'll expand. It will expand. It's forcing, in a sense, because I do think that Jupiter sort of forces you to expand. Now, you can say no, but it's going to push, and you're going to have to push against it to get that no going through. You can
That's
say no, and you can reject
yeah.
it, but it wants to push you to expand you into the places you need to go, the things you need to do.
Right.
So, do if you ask, do you feel the push? And the truth is, I do. Do you enjoy the push? And the truth is, I don't. I don't like to be pushed. Now, get this, on the magic side, the one planet I've developed the most relationship with is freaking Jupiter.
That's
Okay.
interesting.
That's the talisman I created. That's what did everything has been Jupiter. Okay. So
maybe you should do something special on that day for on the magic side of it.
Probably,
Or,
probably. I
an
probably
intention
will.
of setting.
Absolutely. Yeah. Set that, get that all. But it's a it's an interesting thing. And Jupiter's been like the pickiest one. Like it's sort of like it's like they want to develop, they want you to, I want to talk to you, I want to relate to you, I want to do that kind of thing, so in the
Mm-hmm.
sort of those angelic beings of Jupiter. And so that's been on the magic side, that's been a thing. Now again, I just thought of that now because it's like, oh my god. So um that's really here nor there on anything, but it is sort of interesting, um that this, like, Jupiter is really playing a fairly significant role right now. So I'll say that.
Yeah, that is really interesting. And hopefully will bring some positive experiences for you
Oh,
during
it
that
will.
time.
It will. I mean, I know that.
Yeah. And
I'm,
interestingly enough, I just looked up your chart. Your Jupiter is right on my ascendant. So I will
oh,
be having Jupiter cross over my ascendant on that, probably close to the same day.
okay.
So hey, there'll
What
be a
degrees
party.
you're ascended at? What degrees you're
At
ascended at?
23, but yours
Oh
is
yeah, and I'm at
22. So
22. Jupiter's at 22.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
So that's it. We're gonna have a good
Interesting.
time.
Yeah,
That'll be
and
interesting.
yeah, my Jupiter, that's the only thing I have as planet-wise in Taurus. That's it. And that's
Mm-hmm.
why, the Jupiter in Taurus in the 12th, that's why my spirituality always has to be really practical and planted. It
Yeah.
has it has to have a practicality to it. I get pissed when it doesn't, as you know. Um, it's like
It
if
just
it
doesn't make sense if it's just, because someone told me, because someone told them, because someone told
yep,
them. It's like that
nope.
telephone game.
Or if
It's
it
like
doesn't, like, it's like you do something but it's not
feel
doing anything. Like, okay, I
right.
literally, if it's not going to do anything, then I'm not doing it. Like, why am I doing it? If it's not
Yeah.
going to impact my life and be really a help, I'm big on the whole phrase of Jesus, test me, see, like, test it. Like, I think you could, I think you could have a scientific attitude with spirituality in the idea of test it. If it's not doing
Yeah.
anything, then stop it, you know?
Right.
So I
It's
think
not.
that's how you can test it. Can you test for what's causing it? Well, not really. But you can test for effects. Like if it works. Like I had someone today was saying, well, I guess I can believe in this astrology now. And I'm like, oh, I don't want you to believe it. Like, I don't want you to believe it.
Not a belief
Test it.
system.
Either it's true and it works or it doesn't, but don't believe it just because I say so and
That's
because
a
I
good
can
point.
seemingly convince. I don't want you to do that. That can bind people in ways that are negative. I want you to test it. You know, does this make sense? Does this work for you? Does this help you? Is this going to help your relationship? If it's going to do that, great. If it can help you understand or see things from a different way and really assist you in your life, wonderful. But you should never believe it. Like that's ridiculous. You don't
Yeah.
believe astrology. Yeah.
Like you believe in
Use it. Test
science.
it. Yeah. It absolutely. That's to me, that's how you can use a healthy scientific. There's a lot of
Right.
science that would say, well, God doesn't exist. Well, that's bull. How are you testing anything? You're just
Right.
one, like, you're not
It's your
testing
personal
anything.
belief system,
It's your
maybe.
belief. So
Right.
you're throwing science out and you're putting a belief behind it. That's ridiculous.
Yeah, that is
Do
kind of
the
silly.
test. It says if you pray, what does it actually say? Okay, so what's the concept of prayer? Can prayer
Speaking to God.
help you? Well, can it make your life better? Can you can it add a quality? Well, test it. See, pray for a month on this day like to do this and see how you feel at the end of the month. Say, I'm going to
That's a
do this
good
for a
point.
month. I'm going to test it and see. So don't that to me is how you do stuff. That's how you apply scientific principles to spiritual principles. You do
Mm-hmm.
that way. But don't just believe it. Like again, you're not really asked exactly to do that. So when it talks about faith is based on hearing. So you have to hear something either inside yourself and you have to say, I believe this to be the voice. Well, I consider this to be the voice of God, but let me test it. Let me see. Is it? So I feel I've heard this. I'm going to act according as though I have, and I'm going to test to see if I'm hearing what we would call a divine voice or something. I'm just going to test it. Okay, great. Do that. Don't just believe it. Don't just blindly believing anything is ridiculous. That's going to get you
Yeah.
in trouble. So I'm not
Yeah.
for that. I'm not for that in astrology. I'm not for that in religion. I'm not for that in anything. Test everything. Test it all. If it
I
works for
agree.
you, wonderful. If it doesn't, yeah, just move on. Do something else.
Yeah, make something work in your life as opposed to just going blindly or because that's what you've always done, tradition, whatever the reason
Absolutely.
is. Many people have
Absolutely.
different reasons.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
No. Yeah.
Well,
And hey,
this was,
we've given cycles, and it's like, test them. See, look at your
yeah,
cycles. Look at the
yeah,
back
they
ones you've been
really,
through. Look at the ones you're coming up to, and see, does it make sense? So
yeah. Yeah, and I think it can be used as a guiding light of sorts to, you know.
absolutely.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Yep. All right. Well, this was great. Thanks again, of course, Christopher, for joining me. And yeah, we'll see you on the next one, guys. Bye.
Awesome.